What does it mean in man-woman relationships for a wife to be a proper help to a husband or a woman to a man? Anyone who is interested in this question is welcome. The Bible begins by providing insights into relationships because the Bible, like all other scriptural documents or scriptural texts that are interested in the very foundations of life, attaches supreme value to relationships. For after all, the foundation on which life is built is relationship. So, as per the biblical account of the creation of humankind, particularly as recorded in the second chapter of the book of Genesis, God shapes Adam out of the dust of the earth. Then he did not have life. Then God breathes into his nostrils and he becomes a living soul. And then God regards him, or God considers his state or his plight. And in the 18th verse of the second chapter, God says, or is recorded as God saying, "It is not good that man be alone, and therefore I will provide a proper help," or a help meet, according to the King James's version, to him. I'll provide a proper help to him. Now, surely this verse is well known, and well known not only among Christians but also among non-Christians, going by my experience among various communities in the last half a century. But I'm not so sure if Christians and others who are familiar with the text understands the meaning of this. What does it mean, or what did God mean by saying, "I'll provide to Adam, who is now alone, a proper help"? So in this video, I seek to share with you the understanding that I have arrived at through a lifetime of seeking reflection and deepening understanding. So let's get started. The very first principle I want to state is that God, coming to the conclusion that it is not good for Adam to be alone, is clearly a recognition of the limitation in Adam as a human being. So it is in relation to God's idea of what it means to be human that God comes to a conclusion that it is not good for Adam to be alone. So there is an idea of being human. Then there is an object or a person called Adam. So God connects the two, the person with the idea, and finds that there is a gap. And God wants to bridge the gap or bridge the gulf. This is the first principle to be understood. The second principle to be understood is that when God says it's not good for Adam to be alone, it also means that it's not good for Eve to be alone. But since Eve is not created, that statement is still not chronologically valid because Eve is not yet. But now, as we regard the entire situation, we can very safely say that what applies to Adam also applies to Eve. It's not good for either that anyone be alone or both be alone, separate. That is the clear understanding. That is to say, in the same degree that Adam needs Eve, Eve also needs Adam. So therefore, human relationships are posited or envisaged or situated on a foundation of the inadequacy, or rather the incompleteness, of individuals who cannot presume self-sufficiency in relation to oneself. That is to say, the very foundation on which relationship is built or established is that I am not complete in myself. And therefore, I need somebody else to attain that blessed state of being complete or being whole. WHOLE, whole. So, therefore, the most fundamental idea or insight into relationship is this, that relationship is the privilege given to us to attain wholeness. And only that state in which two individuals participate should be called a relationship, which enables both to attain this blessed state of wholeness. Two incomplete individuals, and all individuals are by definition in themselves incomplete, merely coexisting, living under the same roof, sharing the same environment, the same economic arrangement, the same living arrangement, doesn't constitute a relationship. It's a working arrangement, all right, but it's not a proper relationship. So that's why this whole question of complementarity becomes very important, though people don't often reflect on this and understand its inner logic. So that's the second principle that I want to say, want to sort of place before you for your consideration. Now, let's take the next step forward. Why am I insufficient in myself? And therefore, why is it that it's not good for me to be alone, or it's not good for you to be alone? And that's precisely the subject of our inquiry. What we have said so far is by way of preparation. Now, in order to understand this, let's take an example. The example that I'm going to take is a little subtle, but it will become very clear if you pay attention to this and endure with me a little while. If we have to deepen our understanding, we need to have patience and we need to persevere. Modern culture is a culture of immediacy and convenience. Therefore, it's a culture also of impatience. And impatience is the foremost enemy to human intellectual and spiritual development. This is a proposition too obvious to warrant further explanation, and therefore I don't venture into it in order to economize on time. Now let's consider an example. Now, for example, this is, let's say, this is my eye drops. I suffer from dry eyes, therefore I have to infuse eye drops into my eyes every 3 hours. So this is my eye drops. Now, how do I know that this is a bottle of eye drops? Now, when you say, well, you can very simply say, well, you see it and it's there. But that's not how it works. Now, in order for me to recognize that this is a bottle of eye drops, first, I must have a notion as to what eye drops are like, or what a container or a bottle of eye drops could look like. I also should have some idea about what eye drops can do for me, because the kind of eye drops I use will depend upon my particular human state, my physical condition, in which case it is dryness of the eyes. So, now, therefore, what is important in recognizing this is my inner state. But, that is to say, if I don't have any idea about the condition of my eyes, any idea about what dryness is, any idea about what the remedy for dryness is, any idea about what artificial tears or eye drops are like, or any idea about how it is packaged, any idea about how it is diffused, all these ideas exist within me, must exist within me for me to come to a certain idea that this object that I see is indeed a bottle of eye drops. But even if I have all these ideas within myself, I would still not recognize a bottle of eye drops unless and until the bottle is there. The object called the bottle of eye drops becomes for me a source of visual sensation, which then activates the idea of a bottle of eye drops that I already have. So my perception of a bottle of eye drops becomes a partnership between me and the bottle of eye drops. Both must be there in order to complete the perception of an eye drop. Otherwise, the eye drop will remain, it will remain there forever, and it will perish without being used. I will remain here with all my distress in my eyes, and I will not be able to make any use of this bottle of eye drops, even if it's within reach, even if it's the best brand of eye drops ever manufactured, unless and until I have that something within me which enables me to recognize this as a bottle of eye drops, and the infusion of its contents possibly giving me such great relief. So both sides have to work together in order for something to happen. That's a basic principle I want to submit to your consideration. Now, in myself, therefore, even in relation to alleviating the distress in my eyes, in myself I am not complete, or my needs will not be met. I need that bottle of eye drops. They are manufactured by somebody somewhere far away, people I do not know. And certainly I don't know the person who invented it, the person who formulated it, so on and so forth. But it is there, and unless and until it is there, all my knowledge will be of no use. And at the same time, even if it is there, I don't have that supposition, that conception, that idea, that understanding, that subjective understanding as to what a bottle of eye drops would look like. The presence of a bottle sitting on my table will mean absolutely no relief to me. So there is this complementarity, there is this partnership. You can, if you like, call it subjective-objective relationship. I am very now let me come to this next part of my argument. More specifically, why is it not good for Adam to be alone? Now, a person, particularly the male ego, is inclined to be very, very subjective. Subjectivity means I take everything on my terms. Now, for example, how do I understand? How do I understand that this is a bottle of eye drops? It's because of my understanding. That's my subjectivity, my understanding. Now, I can as well understand, I can as well think that this is a bottle of poison. That's my subjective prejudice. Now, if this is a bottle of eye drops, and subjectively I feel that this is a bottle of poison, then it becomes a clear instance of prejudice. Now, prejudice always militates against truth. So now suppose the bottle is on my table, and I, because of a certain mental aberration, I've concluded that this is a bottle of poison. I'll never touch it. Then I may need the help of somebody else, a doctor, for example, to tell me, look, I can assure you this is not poison. This is indeed excellent eye drops. And the great distress that you feel in your eyes on account of your dry eyes will be alleviated if you infuse these eye drops every 3 hours or 4 hours as the need arises. So I need somebody else, if I'm in that state, two conditions. One, utter ignorance. I do not know what this is. I have no idea what this is. I've never seen a bottle of eye drops before. So it's ignorance. Ignorance also will prevent me from taking advantage of it. The other is prejudice, in which I conclude that yes, there is a bottle sitting on my table, but it's a bottle of poison. So in both cases, I need the help of somebody other than myself to tell me, look, don't you see there is a bottle sitting on your table which can be of great help to you? It's a bottle of eye drops. I said, oh, is that so? Then let me try it. The second case is somebody comes and tells me, oh, you think this is a bottle of poison or what? You have this great problem. It can give you tremendous relief. It's a bottle of eye drops. Why don't you use it? I said, oh, is that so? Then I'll try. So in both cases, I need the help of somebody other than myself. So therefore, if we have to attain a state of completeness, we need the other. So I am subjective, and subjectivity, I can only be subjective. In myself, I'm always subjective, and subjectivity will have its limitations. Therefore, if I have to attain that blessed state of wholeness or completeness, I need somebody other than myself to be part of this whole perception, which finally amounts to a blessed or meaningful or useful experience or enriching experience. But the point here is that two individuals arbitrarily chosen, just because 1 plus 1 is there, it will not become a blessed state. In fact, it can become a very, very unblessed state, a miserable state, if that other person or I myself, I'm not in a position to relate to that person in a particular manner. Now, if, for example, if I'm full of ego, now the problem with the ego is it insists on taking everything else, everybody else on one's own terms, and therefore ego will suppress the other, distort and disfigure the other, and enslave the other. So therefore, the ego, which is the sort of brutal subjectivity of the individual, serves as a stumbling block in the path of forming happy relationships. So if I'm too subjective, I become absolutely egoistic, and my egoism will disqualify me from forming healthy, happy relationships. On the other hand, if that other person is too introverted or egoistic, then again there's a huge problem. Therefore, the idea of proper help meets, being proper help to each other means that together the man and the woman, or the two participating individuals, even in friendships, this is absolutely true, should constitute one happy, harmonious whole, which enables us to participate in the various possibilities of life in a better manner than we would if we stayed alone and cut off from others. But then the problem really is, in a society which breeds this notion of individual self-sufficiency, a society that puts a premium on the independence of the self, a society that prides itself on the ideology of individuality, the self-sufficient autonomous individual, trains and develops individuals who are inwardly crippled with this idea that one is sufficient unto oneself, and therefore one has every right to relate to others only in terms of one's own dispositions, one's own likes and dislikes, one's own calculations of profit and loss. And this renders individuals incapable of forming relationships, and therefore a society becomes atomized. This is a word that's been used increasingly in the 20th century. So we are living in an atomized society, which means a society of isolated individuals who harbor the myth of individual self-sufficiency, and who therefore thinks that they are sufficient and complete in themselves, who would not therefore theoretically need the help of anybody else, and therefore it's good for them to be alone. It is good for them to be alone. So this is the state that we need to recognize, and therefore the most fundamental idea in all this is that relationships is the provision to facilitate the full development of every human being, and therefore the hallmark of a healthy and happy relationship is that within that relationship both participating members or both participating individuals grow, and in a healthy relationship each serves as a catalyst for growth for the other. And it's when this joy of growing up together declines or hits the dead end, the relationships begin to become disappointing, and both parties begin to develop a sense of resentment towards the other. And in our times in particular, this aspect or this purpose, this blessed purpose of a healthy relationship must be emphasized and highlighted. Namely, the relationships are provided to facilitate, to stimulate, to enable the full development of both participating individuals. In other words, relationship must be a state of personal growth for both, personal growth for both. And if one is growing and the other is not growing, then there is a problem. Both have to grow together. It's very much like harmony in music. If one note changes from one octave to the other, all others also have to correspondingly go. So if you think of a relationship with two notes, if one note is played on a higher scale, then this other note remaining where it is creates disharmony and becomes unbearable. And that's exactly what happens in relationships when growth is excluded from it. And unfortunately, in modern times, which is consumerist, hedonistic culture, the idea, the blessed spiritual goal of personal growth, all round holistic personal growth, is substituted with the goal of consuming pleasure. And therefore, rather than seeing each other as the catalyst for personal growth, people think in a relationship, people think of each other as the means for promoting individual pleasure. So people are now becoming only consumers of pleasure, in which case the other will always be an object of manipulation and exploitation, and it will always be reciprocal. It's not that man exploits woman, seeing her as an object of consumption of pleasure or the means for the consumption of pleasure. That will be reciprocated because it's a universal and inevitable principle that what we do to others will be done to us. So if the man sees the woman as an object of pleasure to be exploited at will, the woman will do likewise, though her manner of doing may differ, and therefore ultimately the end result would be tragic and miserable. We'll all be cheated of the blessedness of a happy relationship. And the priority that God the Creator attaches to the fundamental need that every human being has for happy, fulfilling, enriching, empowering relationship is recognized right at the outset when God Himself says, "It's not good that Adam be alone." And therefore, it's highly important in our times when a contrary ideology rules the roost to be clearer about this. I don't know to what extent I have succeeded in transferring my understanding through the formulation that I've offered you through this video. I can only request you, in view of the importance of this topic, to reflect on this very key aspect of human relationship and human life and welfare, and develop your own degree of clarity concerning it. And ultimately, everything becomes clear only when it is put to practice and theory is turned into experience. So I conclude by thanking each one of you for your kind attention. All the very best. Bye for the present.